Good afternoon, everyone. If you haven't taken your seats yet, if you wouldn't mind just taking your seats, we can get started. I'm really excited about this panel, and I want to thank Will McCants, Shadi Hamid, and Brookings, obviously, for inviting me today. We have a panel entitled The Future of Pluralism, Citizenship, and Religion in the Middle East, and we've got approximately 1 hour to solve all of these issues. So clearly, we're gonna be successful, because you only need an hour to solve the Middle East. But if anyone can actually do it in an hour, I know it's this fantastic panel that we have here. So I will introduce them. First of all, we're going to go to Shadi Hamid. He's a senior fellow in the project on U.S. relations with the Islamic world in the Center for Middle East Policy at the Brookings Institution. Mustafa Akyol, a best-selling author and scholar, and his latest book, The Islamic Jesus, is out in good bookstores everywhere. Bassem Youssef, a doctor, a satirist, and author of Revolution for Dummies, Laughing Through the Arab Spring, and Labidi-Maïza, a deputy and former vice president of the Constituent Assembly of Tunisia and member of the Ennahda party. So if you would just give them a round of applause, please. They've come a long way to do this. And I'm just going to ask Will, do you want me to stay here, Will, or am I going to go sit down? Thank you, I can sit, that's nice. I've got high heels on. Okay. So I think if we just want to, I want to start with a sort of philosophical question before we get to some practicalities. So Shadi, I'll start with you. Is Islam, all Islam, inherently political?
Oh, wow, that's a tough one to start with, yeah. So I would argue, that I'm not someone who likes this sort of discourse of all religions are exactly the same, they're all peaceful, they all basically, yes, there is, of course, an ultimate message that all major religions share in one degree or another, but we shouldn't discount that there are major differences in how religions relate to public life and the political sphere. So one argument that I've made in my own work is that due to Islam's founding moment, it does have a different relationship to politics. And we can go back to the obvious stuff, such as Prophet Muhammad, who was not just a man of God or a prophet, but also a politician and a head of state. And that has implications for how Muslims understand and how they relate to their own history, obviously. And also, I think there is no equivalent to Sharia in the Christian context. So you can make maybe some comparisons, as Mustafa has done in his work, to the halakha, Jewish law, but when it comes to Christianity, there isn't really something quite like Sharia. Canon law is maybe the closest equivalent, but canon law doesn't cover the same breadth of topics and issues. And you don't exactly hear Christian, no matter how far right you are in sort of among Christian evangelicals in the US, no one is talking about the implementation of canon law. That is not a call to arms the way Sharia is, let's say, in terms of being a very important and divisive issue in public life, and most of the countries we'll be talking about. So I think those differences have to be acknowledged, and if we try to sort of soft pedal it, I think we're actually doing a disservice to. So people will say, well, Islam has a bad image. Let's try to promote as positive of an image as we possibly can and minimize the differences. But I think that doesn't really appeal to American or Western audiences because they see the news, they see the violence and conflict in the Middle East, and they want to have better answers. There's sort of an intuitive sense that something different is going on, and I think it's our job as scholars and analysts is to say, hey, this doesn't mean Muslims are bad. It doesn't, just because Islam has played an outsized role in public life, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be a bad thing, but religion isn't always a bad thing in public life, whether we're talking about Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. Religion can play a positive role.
Well, let me kick it to somebody who might have a different view, Bassem. Let's talk a little bit about whether you think religion does have a role in public life and in governance. Do you think that there is a space for Islam in politics?
Well, thank you so much for inviting me here. It's great to be here. This might be the most monitored place in Manhattan, having all of these Muslims in one place. So, so just to make it safe, Mazel Tov, so they will be. No, I don't. I think that you can speak as much as you want about the exceptionalism of Islam and about Sharia and whatever, but I think if you want to have a country that would have different factions of people, of religions, of ethnicities, of beliefs, I don't think that any country should identify itself by a religion. We have tried it and we failed it, not just in the Arab world, but like in some part of history in the Western world. When you tell me that a country is Christian or Jewish or Islamic, having this as the official religion, you already have set a certain religion as the superior mark, where like you're making people who follow that kind of religion superior to all others, even if you mean it in the most benign way. If you say Sharia, so what kind of Sharia? What kind of interpretation of Sharia are we talking about? Is it the Sharia that is being believed in Wahhabism? Is it the one in Iran? Is it the one in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Tunisia? I mean, Egypt? I mean, who would decide? Who would decide this kind of divine intervention? Who would say who is right and who is wrong? If we have a human-made law, we can argue and we can fight all what we can. But once you bring in the divine, once you bring in the Sharia, and then the Sharia is actually like, it's Quran, it's Hadith, it is fiqh, and it's just so many opinions. Who should we follow? And should we wait for all of the scholars of the Islamic world to define what is the one that we call? And by the way, this we're not talking about, I mean, like for the recent example, for example, in Tunisia. Tunisia has just made a move a few weeks ago about like allowing Muslim women to, or not allowing, but kind of like that the country will not interfere in Muslim women marrying non-Muslim men. And this was met by a very acute attack from other Muslim countries, from other Muslims. So who would decide?
Well, that's a good question, and I want to talk a little bit about what you were saying about superiority, and a kind of like superiority complex maybe that a religion becomes imbued with when it is associated with governance. But as you mentioned Tunisia, and we have my only lady on the panel, by the way, Modarressy, thank you so much to make this. Thank you, thanks. Because there are always too many men in these things, so I'm glad that we are representing with some lady power.
You have already won the debate. I'm rooting for you.
But Modarressy, I mean,
as long as you agree with me.
Modarressy, let's talk a little bit about this, because you've referred to yourself as a Muslim Democrat. What does that mean, and can that actually exist?
It seems that it exists, since it exists in Tunisia. Okay, being Muslim Democrat or simply means that we are not going to split ourselves. At home, we are religious. We believe in Islamic creeds and values. And okay, now we are in a public sphere. Let's forget about religion and just be non-religious or laïque, like the French term. It's being at the same time believing in these values of Islam, more or less religious, but with these values, without splitting ourselves, dealing with public affairs. Trying to find solution, for example, for unemployment, for housing, for social solidarity, but not Islamic, or let's say, saying that you see, our solutions are the best because they are Islamic solutions. We are not bringing sacredness, this, or la sacralité, and put it on politics. In this way, it would be dangerous. That means that if you don't follow our example, if you don't accept our program, so you are in a very bad situation. It's a sin. No, it is with our values, in being here and now, in living in this world, borrowing from the democracy, from whatever, let's say, other traditions, being useful to our country, being living our time, and not in any way saying that we are the best Democrats or that we are the best Muslims. just dealing with our reality, with our means, without, as I said, excluding one or the other element of our identity, and with opening on human heritage, human experience. So simply being a citizen.
It sounds like we could borrow some of that in the United States right now. I don't know if anyone else agrees. Before I come to Mustafa, I just want to ask for a show of hands in the room as well. So I want to make sure you're all awake and paying attention. How many people in the room believe that there is such a thing and there can be such a thing as a Muslim Democrat? Show of hands, please. All right, so like 65, 45 or something. Okay, well, so Mustafa, let's talk a little bit about that, this idea of Muslim democracy, liberal Islam. Is that such, is there such a thing as liberal Islam? And if so, where do you think it exists right now in the world?
Thank you. First of all, democracy and liberalism are two different things, and I think Shadi makes good emphasis on that. So there can be illiberal democracy, which is not a great model either. So democracy is a system, liberalism is a philosophy. But before that, let me say a few things about what people said, if you will.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Well, I agree with Shadi on many things, but not all things. Islam is, by nature, yes, tends to be political. Because you have Prophet Muhammad as the head of a state, not just a preacher, but like a religious figure. You have the institution called caliphate, although it's not mandated in the Quran, but it's a part of Islamic history. You have Sharia law. And it doesn't make Islam exceptional, I think. It makes Christianity exceptional not to have Sharia of its own. Because Islam and Judaism have those things. And when you look at Moses and Joshua, you combine them, you have also like a political and military leadership as well. That's why we should look at halakha discussions, I think, about modernity rather than just Christianity. But that's the thing. Here's this thing. Islam, yes, inevitably has a political nature. That's a fact. The question is, how do we articulate that political nature? By establishing a totalitarian state which patrols the street and imposes Islam? That is one. That's a synthesis of Islam and totalitarianism, if you will, which we see some examples in the world today. Or by basically accepting a liberal framework in which religion is not coerced. So you go back to roots in Islam about freedom, about not coercion, about free choice. And then you articulate Islam in a way which will uphold certain political principles like justice, like security, like freedom, which is a kind of new concept actually in Islamic civilization from one perspective, but it has its roots. And from the 19th century onwards, beginning in the Ottoman Empire and the Arab world, you see this trend called Islamic liberalism, which I very much believe in. And these were like thinkers who said, yes, we are pious Muslims and we have a tradition, we have to reinterpret it. Because classical Islam was also an interpretation for its age. I mean, Sharia was implemented, it was implemented in certain ways with certain hudud, and it had a context. And the question is, can we take that and bring it today? So therefore, I would take a middle ground between Basif and Shadi in that sense. I would argue for a secular state, for a state to be secular. A state should not be identified with one group, sect, or ethnicity, or political ideology, so it's inclusive. But do we have an Islamic argument for a secular state? So that state will be accepted by Muslims who want to see their values represented. And we do have an argument. From within Islam for a secular state.
And would you say that the notion of a secular state, if you look at Germany, for example, the party is the Christian Democrat Party, would you say that you want to see a secular state across the entire world, not just necessarily in countries that are nominally or practically Muslim?
Yeah, first, actually, I should distinguish between a secular and secularist state. A secular state is not hostile to religion, it's respectful of religious freedom. And you have secularist states which are not like that. I don't in particular like French laïcité because it's really disrespectful to religious freedom in terms of people wearing what they want, like a hijab or burkini, it's called. So there are different kinds of secularity. Maybe U.S. tradition of secularity is healthier than what you see in continental Europe, especially the French case. So there are different secularities as well. But the question is, can we have a state that is really they would call civil state, I think the Arab context,
in
that
Tunisia.
is respectful of its citizens, but it's the state of the citizens, not one ideology, one sect, one group, and one religion. And yes, the majority will articulate itself maybe more so, but the minority has to be protected. Like, are we ever going to that direction in the Muslim world today? Well, yes, in Tunisia. I should say, if you asked this question 5 years ago to me, I would be singing the praises of a Turkish model. We have big issues in Turkey these days. We can talk about them now, later. But I think in Tunisia, with all the, with my enthusiasm, we've seen something that we have not seen anywhere else yet, which is the creation of a constitution, a real constitution, not something imposed by a junta or by a great leader which crushes its enemies, but a constitution where different groups agreed on, Nakhta and Nida Tunisia, so seculars and Islamists agreeing on a framework, and it's a new project, it's in the beginning, but the role Tunisia has taken and brought the Arab Spring into some success is, I think, a reason to be hopeful for the future.
Well, you're very hopeful and enthusiastic. Bassem, any of this enthusiasm and hope, does any of it resonate with you, or do you think that it's more of a...
I think we're actually agreeing on many things, but sometimes we make the mistake that we're talking about two different things, thinking that they're the same. You could be, in yourself, a Muslim Democrat, in yourself, a self-proclaimed Muslim rebel. You can call yourself a Muslim Hani Ludu. You can call yourself whatever you want. I don't care. What I care is the structure that everybody works under, the umbrella that everybody is operating on. You can be an Islamic party, you could be a Salafi party, you could be a Muslim liberal, you can be a Muslim whatever, but the umbrella governing all of that has to be a totally secular constitution that does not side with a certain religion or a certain religious belief. That's my thing. You can have as many religious religious parties as you want, but there's always this potential of abuse if you start putting religion in the constitution. So if a Christian if a Christian party reaches power, or a Muslim party reaches power, it's fine because the parameters are the same. It's not because, all right, most of the people want a certain part of Sharia. This is the potential of you in Tunisia, you can present yourself as a solution. We people, we have these Muslim values, and this is our solution. But there are limits in the constitution that could actually hinder you from going beyond. Because
Shadi, I want to bring Shadi to come in for that, because this idea of the potential of abuse if a religion is codified in a constitution. Do you agree that there's always that potential of abuse?
Here's the thing. So there is actually quite a bit of agreement, and Mustafa and I have had these debates before where we both consider ourselves to be small L liberals. So in a sense, liberalism may be the ideal, and as someone who's born and raised in America and is very much influenced by the U.S. Constitution and American ideals, that is what I naturally gravitate towards. Where I think we disagree is on what's realistic or practical to expect for the foreseeable future. I don't see liberalism or liberal Islam gaining much traction among the masses, let's say, among large numbers of people. It might have some support among elites in certain countries, but even there, not really, because we should be very clear. There are people who are maybe secularists or call themselves liberals, but they're not actually liberals. They are very intolerant of alternative opinions. They support military coups against democratically elected governments. And Turkey has a long history with that, where we saw secularists supporting military coups repeatedly. And of course, in Egypt, we have the most obvious example, at least recently, where most so-called liberals in Egypt supported a military coup against an elected government. And then there was a massacre afterwards. So that to me raises the question of how do you build liberalism without a real constituency of liberals in these countries? The other thing that I would say, though, is democracy. Ultimately, I think what we all want, and I think there would probably be quite a bit of agreement that we think democracy is a good thing. But the problem is if we say that the Constitution has to be secular, what happens if a democratically elected constitutional committee wants Islam to play more of a role in the Constitution? What happens if an Islamist party keeps on winning elections and they say, well, we want to introduce new amendments or articles to the Constitution. Even here in the U.S., we have a high supermajority bar, so you have to have 2/3 of both houses of Congress and I guess, 75% of the states in order to change a constitution. That's a pretty high bar, but you can still meet that bar and surpass it. And we have had instances in our own history as Americans where majorities have done illiberal things and restricted freedom. Prohibition is an obvious example of that, right? So the question then is how, if large majorities of people in, say, Egypt or Turkey or Tunisia, we might not like it. We might hate that they believe these things. But if they keep on voting for parties and saying, hey, we don't want totalitarianism, we don't want Wahhabism, we just want, in some sense, more Islam in our politics, and then what can we do if that's what people keep on voting
Let me ask
for?
Bassem, what do you think in that situation, if it's a democratic, through elections, people say, I want to inject a bit more religion in our schooling system, for example.
That's great.
Do you agree with that as a concept?
What happens to the minorities then? What happens to the people who doesn't want to follow this? What happens to the 1%, 2%, 5%, 20% who are Muslims but they don't believe in Sharia, who are Muslim and don't want to go by Sharia? Constitutions are made to protect minorities, right? This is this is going to be the first goal. There's nothing democratic about constitution, all right? Constitution is there to protect the democracy. Democracy is not made to take away the freedom from the minorities. And this is what, if it was only democracy, maybe the founding fathers, if they have said the Constitution of the United States to the masses who were Puritans and very religious, they would not support the separation of state and church. This is something to protect the people, all right? So it's not like, it's kind of like 3 people, 2 of them voting to eat the 3rd one. That's not the kind of democracy that you can argue for. And then the other thing that you said, Shadi, in the beginning, I'm sorry, I kind of phased out, wait. It's the way, yeah, it's kind of, again, I get back to my original point. When you tell me Islamic or Islamic Sharia, who decides? And, oh yeah, I remember my point. Yes, when you said there is like people who are not ready for kind of liberalism, it reminds me with the late Omar Suleiman who said like Egyptian people are not ready for democracy. But the thing is, you have to remember those masses of people. Who were they listening to over the years? They were listening for religion, talking heads, who were telling them that secularism equals being an infidel. And now being a secular is a very bad name in Egypt. If you say like I'm a secular person, it means that you're an infidel. And so this is, you cannot really blame the masses of the people. You can blame the people who used religion to convince people otherwise that secular meaning against God. So, and this has been in place for decades, 30, 40 years ago. And by the way, it's not just the religious authorities. It is pretty much the military who have actually used religion as much as the religious institution did and used religion as a part of it. If you track down the history of Egypt, for example, the one who has instituted the Sharia law to be part of the constitution was Sadat.
I want to go to Modarressy because I just want to, in terms of the first point about the Constitution, because I think it's important.
I feel being neglected.
I don't think you're being neglected, Bassem.
I will drink my Islamic water.
Plenty of time to drink your Islamic water. But Modarressy, in terms of the practicalities of a constitution to protect minorities or to in no way be shaped or influenced by religion, even if it's a democratic consensus that leads it to be that way. What do you think about that? Do you think that a constitution should serve in and of itself to be utterly secular, and then you have political parties underneath that umbrella, as Bassem was talking about, that can have a religious viewpoint if it wishes?
I think that the issue is real, is serious and legitimate. We have to protect, if there is something to protect in a state, minorities, and also people who are fragile. Yet, it's not a matter of being religious or secularist. Shall I remind here the audience that one of the most aggressively anti-minorities was the secularist Germany. Germany, who persecuted Jews, were not a religious Germany. And also, the wars which happened in Europe, Eastern Europe, after the disaggregation of the communist bloc, they were not, and they were very harsh against minorities. It was not based on religious feelings. So I think it's not a matter of secularism or religion, it's a matter of accepting plurality or pluralism or not, taking account that we are not alone in the social space, in the space of the state, and that we share it with others or not. And also, we have witnessed, especially after the events of Arab Spring, that those who refused and even made a coup d'etat against democracies are those who are not less referring to religion, but to secularism. So, no, this is not the matter. I think it's a matter of culture, of the being sensitive to the other, being aware that we have to share. We have to take into consideration the other. And the culture we inherited is not a culture of sharing. It's not a culture taking into account the difference. But even with despotism, it hides differences. And even as citizens, in Tunisian dialect, we say they want us to be muwatin salah, to be good citizen.
Right.
Thinking like everybody else, behaving like everybody else. For example, I'm the best Muslim since I'm Muslim. I'm the best Tunisian Muslim since Tunisian Islam is the best. I'm the best Tunisian Muslim Arab because Islam and Arabity is. This is the kind of uniformity we were living under it. So it was not a lack of secularism. It was a lack of diversity and accepting diversity. Yet, I do agree with that. Excuse me, that's the finish.
Sure.
I do agree with Mr. Bassem Youssef. We have to write down, to mention in a constitution, articles guaranteeing the protection of minorities. This is why in Tunisian constitution, we introduced Article 2. Article 2 defines what kind of state is the Tunisian state we want to build. It's a civil state based on 3 principles: citizenship, supremacy of the law, and sovereignty of the people, to guarantee that no one came after that, let's say, by religious feeling or religious pressure and transform or change it into theocracy, or someone come and change it into military also state. So we have to mention in a constitution articles guaranteeing the rights of everybody. So it's not a matter, again, of secularism or religion, but it's a matter of liberties and rights.
And you mentioned it's a matter of culture as well. So lots of agreement here then. You mentioned culture, which I think is interesting, because Mustafa, I mean, you wrote about this in Islam Without Extremes. What do you think about what Modarressy had to say?
Well, I say, you see, Tunisia is great. You know, that's one. They get it in Tunisia. It is absolutely certain that constitutions should not be sacrificed to the tyranny of the majority. I mean, if you get 51% and make a constitution that, you know, caters to the 51% or 60% or something, and then minorities, just individuals who happen to not agree with the majority, if they feel threatened, if they're excluded, that is not a good model of democracy. That is tyranny of the majority. That's a huge problem. How do we then have a constitution-making process? That's a great question, and I think every country has its own context. But again, Tunisians have been able to do this, so it is possible.
Why do you think Tunisians have been able to do it and other countries haven't?
The process.
Well, because I think Tunisia has civil society that was engaged. Tunisia's Islamists proved to be more moderate, progressive, wise. I think Rashid Ghannouchi's personality helped a lot. I wish we had a Rashid Ghannouchi in Turkey too. We don't. So that kind of, I mean, the way it's articulated, whereas in other parts of the Muslim world, you see states being captured by this or that group. Look at Syria, look at Iraq. Who has the state? Oh, these guys or the other ones. And if you have the state, you have everything. You have the economy, you have the jobs, you have security, you have muhabarat and all that. But if the other guys get it, you'll be decimated. So that's why fighting for the state is so intense. The question is, how do we build inclusive states in the Middle East? And that is inclusive religious-wise, ethnically too. Like in Turkey, the constitution has been secular, that's fine, nice. But we had another problem. Turkey's Kurdish citizens didn't like the constitutions because the constitution says every citizen of the Turkish Republic is a Turk. And the Kurds say, we are not Turks, we happen to be the citizens of Turkey. So it could be ethnic, it could be, religious. The question is, how do you get to that point? And to come to this liberal framework. And my answer is that people do not come to liberalism just out of niceness or politeness. I mean, people are not liberal by nature. I mean, we tend to be biased against people we don't know. I mean, it's not that easy to nurture. You come to that by trial and error. I mean, how did the European Union come to be? Centuries of slaughter of Protestants and Catholics each other, religious wars, World War I, World War II, and then some Europeans said, let's find a framework where nobody kills each other and everybody feels equal, and that was like a very new idea, and it worked so far. And now, even in Europe and the West, there are people who actually started to doubt that. Maybe right now in the Middle East, we are going through all that trial and error process. I'll tell you one thing in Turkey. Typically in Turkey, laiklik or secularism is something not liked by religious conservatives because it means banning the headscarf and something. It was an authoritarian one. Lately, in the past couple of years, some Islamic opinion leaders in Turkey said, maybe secularism is good because they've seen the use of Islam for political power so much. But opposite groups saying that God is behind us, we are the right Muslims and you are the heretics. And maybe that's why secularism is needed. Maybe to get rid of all this, we need secularism. So not something as imposed by a colonial legacy or by a secular general who has come to power with a coup, but out of its own organic experience, the Muslim world, the Muslim Middle East will be able to nurture a kind of liberalism. It will take time. It will take a lot of pain, but we should not give up the hope, and we should try to have positive input to this grand historic experience.
Mustafa touched on something really interesting, and so we're talking ostensibly about the Middle East and the broader Muslim world, but we're talking at a time now where quite a bit of what we're discussing applies to
humanity.
But also more specifically the liberal West and Europe and the U.S. And I think it's fair to say that, or some would say this, that we elected in America our first illiberal Democrat in history. And that was very difficult, especially for those of us who are on the minority side of the equation, including Muslim Americans like myself.
You didn't feel included?
Yeah, I did not feel included when the election results came out. But I think what I've learned, at least from my work in research in the Middle East, is that democratic outcomes can be personally threatening to minorities. But I would never try to contest President Trump's legitimacy as our democratically elected president.
But Shadi, people are though, that's the interesting thing, right? Like, we're in America right now and people are, you talked about, and Mustafa was mentioning this, and I really, to all extent, everybody has, that when people are going through revolution or trying to establish a constitution or trying to establish a specific state, history, we go through bloodshed, trauma, war. People are repressed in order to get to some kind of consensus of, what is a state, what is a democratic state. And you have people here in America on the left who would say that they are liberals themselves, who drop in dinner party conversations, I wish there were a coup in America. I wish we could unseat, as somebody that many perceive, as you rightly say, to be illiberal. So, kind of getting to that point of, I guess it isn't unique necessarily to the Islamic world and to the Middle East,
just one thing. Thank God you don't have coup, but you have an independent judiciary, which sometimes can block an executive order that's threatening to human rights.
How independent it is as well. I mean, that's also, again, up for debate,
but here's the thing. I mean, we as human beings, we don't like to be bored. And I think people have gotten bored with, technocratic liberal democracy, and they've moved away from establishment parties on the center left and the center right. And it gets to a fundamental question, what really drives us in political life? And what we've seen in all of these cases, even though they're quite different, whether it's far-right populists in Europe, white nationalism here in the U.S., but also far-right Hindu nationalism in India, Duterte in the Philippines, Orban in Hungary, law and justice, Buddhist
genocidal Buddhist nationalism
it's not
in Myanmar.
the fact that tells us something that people, you can't just tell people, hey, we're going to have a bunch of technocratic experts who manage the government, they'll produce better outcomes, and everyone just chill. People want to believe in something. So if we go into democracy and we assume that we can remove identity, remove religion, remove ideological passions from the public sphere, we're going against the very nature of who we are.
Bassem, what do you think about that?
Well, I agree and disagree about some points. So I agree with Mustafa that there's going to be a lot of pain. I mean, 70 years ago, Europe was killing each other because of military fascism. 100 years before that, for religious fascism. Right now in the Arab world, we're doing both of them at the same time when getting it over with. So, you know, 2 for 1, like an Arab loves a good deal. But it's just, and I agree with what Shadi said about like how you're being left out as a minority Muslim. Right now in America, we're Muslims, we have a lower approval rate than Donald Trump. But the thing is, there's 2 things. I think we are comparing 2 things. One of them is quite clear. I mean, when we say like secular, I mean, we have clear examples. People, since the beginning of the panel, people are talking about liberal Islam and Islamic democracy. I like what? What's our reference? I mean, when I say secular countries, I can see Europe, I can see America. To a lesser extent, Tunisia is moving there. But liberal Islam, democratic Islam, I don't like to tag a religious identity with democracy or liberalism because, again, you put like a sample of superiority. Second thing, Shadi, you said we cannot make the public remove all kind of religious passions. Who said we're going to remove religious passions? We're not going to like go on and like demolish mosques. We're not going to take people's right to pray, to have a religious marriage if they want to. It's about creating an alternative.
On that point, Bassem, just before...
This is another thing.
But
we have been talking about secular, and suddenly you're talking about going to the public and removing religious passions and religious identity. Nobody will remove your identity. Look at this room. How many women are covering their head being hijabis? They're living in America. Did anybody remove your identity? Is anybody removing your identity as a Muslim in America? Nobody is doing that. Who talked about removing your identity? Who talked about having a secular state, meaning that I'm going to take away your right to worship and to practice your religion as you want? The only thing is, practice as much as you want. But don't make your beliefs in Sharia, in Islamic law, in the Quran, affect other people who don't want to believe in them.
Bassem, I want to go back to something you said as well about, you know, a reference point. You said, you know, where is a reference point of it going right? You said Tunisia was kind of moving that way. I guess my question, and then Modarressy, I want to ask you this. Do we need an example? Like, does there have to be a model or an example that's already existed in history for us to base what the ideal, you know, state where Islam and governance kind of coexist peacefully and pluralism can exist? Or do you think that people need to give space and patience, perhaps, for that to actually be created?
But what you are saying is not contradictory. There is no contradiction between, yes, there is necessity to see, to witness an example of work in this Islam and democracy. We need it to say, okay, it's possible. But also we have to be realistic and we need time to develop this example. We need time and also circumstances. We need the adequate atmosphere. This is why I think the issue is not, again, secularism or religiosity. The real issue is democracy and rights and liberties. Exactly. I lived 30 years in France. My family still lives in France. Okay, I can wear my hijab. I very often, even with French laicity, I did not feel threatened. It's not because they are secularist. Because they have law protecting individual rights.
Because of secular values.
Partly, yes. Not only because of secularism, because those who mediated between, for example, Muslim communities and the state in France are Catholic and Protestant.
Mustafa, I want you to respond to what Modarressy just said.
Yes, Protestant, for example, were the best mediator in France between Muslim communities and the state.
This is exactly this is what secular looks like.
Excuse me. Yes. No, please. This is not only because they are secularists, because they also have religious values. It's because of their Christianity also. For example, you said that what really may bother you is that Islam and liberal, Islam and Democrat, how do you react to Christian Democrat parties, for example?
Yes.
Is it problem?
No.
Is it problem?
Sorry, yeah.
No. They are working under an umbrella of a secular state.
Because we're running out of
That's what
time.
I mean. I'm talking about the umbrella. You can call yourself whatever you want.
We're running
but
out
if
of
you
time,
are
so I
going,
really
but
want
if
to
you are
get to other
going to
members of the panel
propose,
as well.
So
if you're going to propose a suggestion of a liberal, democratic, Islamic state, I really want to say which part of Sharia are you going to keep and which part of Sharia are you going to reject? How will the cherry picking
Let
will
me
go?
have a deal with him.
Well, after this, we're all going to have
Tunisia.
pizza and
In
some
Tunisia,
kind of drink
we
as
never
well.
asked for Islamic, liberal, democratic state. We asked for democratic state.
Thank you.
For everybody.
Okay, wait. I really want to allow Mustafa to respond.
Here's
Mustafa.
one tension.
Well, this is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Not there.
We'll take this off afterwards. But yeah, Mustafa, yeah.
Okay, to be honest, there is one tension that has to be addressed when we're discussing Islam and a liberal secular state. We say the liberal secular state allows citizens to practice their religion. That's all good, right? You should be able to practice your religion. But some people will tell you, yeah, I want to practice my religion by stoning the adulterers or killing the apostates. So that's my religion tells me. So the notion of Sharia has to be worked out in the sense that is Sharia really something that Muslims are obliged to implement as a penal code?
Exactly.
The Islamists will say yes, and that's that they will say no. We have to make the woman, wear the hijab. We should force them.
So who decides?
That is a problem. So
and that's my question from the beginning of the panel. Who decides what is left out and what stays in the Sharia?
Let Mustafa make his point.
I am not saying
I agree with him.
An inevitable tension. There are ways to work this out. There are different interpretations of Sharia. You look at maqasid, the intentions of Sharia. You reinterpret that. But this is, and some Muslims have already done this, in every Muslim society. But this is an issue. So therefore, when we say secular liberal state makes you practice your religion, that practice, the limits of that practice also should be defined as something that should be framed with international, like let's say universal human rights. But do you accept universal human rights? That opens another. So there is an issue in terms of the public meaning of Islam, the tradition of Sharia, and the liberals. There's a tension there.
But Mustafa,
Shadi thinks this tension is here to stay forever, whereas I'm saying, if I'm wrong, correct me. Whereas I'm saying, well, it's not necessarily. It is the Islamists see it that way. We can understand Sharia in different ways, and there are other. So we have to work this out, but we shouldn't deny that there's a tension.
But Mustafa, what you laid out is precisely this fundamental divide, which is very difficult to resolve.
It's the meaning of religion.
So essentially, if you're telling Islamist parties that you can be Islamist as long as your Islamism stops at the secular umbrella, then they're not actually allowed to be Islamists. Then that's where you get into this fundamental issue of. Liberals don't want to live under an Islamic state, very understandably so. Islamists do not want to live under a secular state where secularism is enshrined in the Constitution, because they would say that that violates who they are and what they believe.
But don't we do that?
Conversation.
But I think this is an important point, though. Don't we do that here in the United States? We're talking about sort of specifically about Islam, but you were talking about, Islamists don't want this to sort of stop at the door, the secularism to sort of stop at the door. For example, in the United States, if you go down into the South, where evangelicals, a tranche of evangelicalism is in the south of the United States, they would say, well, you are impinging on my religion by allowing abortion, for example.
Making me sell cakes to gays.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think it's just kind of getting back to that notion, and then I want to open it up to Q&A in the audience. But this idea that is Islam totally different as a religion than Christianity, than Buddhism, than any other religion when we're talking about it coexisting in governance?
Well, it's very similar to Judaism, and within Judaism, there are a lot of, at least in history of Judaism, there are a lot of discussions here. One argument to make, like let's say Ikhwan, right, Muslim Brotherhood. Do you want like apostates to be killed? Like have this conversation. If they say yes, then I'll tell them, well, you're an apostate for ISIS. Should they kill you as well if you happen to be an ISIS terrorist?
Right, but that's not what
Sharia, I mean, you start to argue whose Sharia is it? Because according to another Sharia, you are the one who has to be corrected.
So ultimately, the only way to resolve it is through the democratic process where you say, hey, let's have a free, open debate about what Sharia...
Yeah, but the democratic process is not just whoever gets 51% imposes that.
Excuse me.
No, this has to be a conversation too, of course, democratic process.
You are, in French we say, essentialisé. You refer to Sharia as if there is only one frame, whereas Islam in itself, through centuries, and from one place to another, is plural. For example, in Tunisia, in our history, in the 9th century, already women in Kairouan, through their being, let's say, Muslim women in Kairouan, they imposed a contract of marriage, which exists nowhere in Muslim world, and it is the Kairouani.
You abolished slavery before the U.S. too. We should say that. Yeah.
And forbidding polygamy for the husband, since centuries and centuries. And so each country has developed its Islamic pattern or culture, and liberal or less liberal, it's within this culture. So of course, I don't think that we will say, okay, Sharia, there is only one model of Sharia and apply it. No. I think that we have to relativize.
Relativization of the Sharia?
Yes. Excuse my French.
No, I totally agree, and you see yet another reason to admire Tunisia, the light of the Ummah.
But Bassem, I want to ask then, is Tunisia the best example out there? If it's
compared
going
to
to happen,
the Arab world, it's a great example.
So can every other country adopt Tunisia's approach? So, for example, Turkey. I mean, people talk about Turkey as a failed...
Let's not talk about Turkey. Let's not talk about Egypt.
They talk about Turkey or Egypt as an example as failed experiments, right? Like, people have started to refer to all these nations as almost failed experiments, as if they are done now, because they touched nearly a sense of liberalism and now they've failed.
Again,
would you say Tunisia is the best example and every other country should model themselves on that?
Tunisia is different because they never had a strong military to control from the beginning. Habib Bourguiba, you can say anything about him, but he made sure that the military was not strong enough to control things, which actually helped them in the future, right now. But the thing is, Shadi, you just said liberals don't like to live under Islamist state, and then Islamists don't like to live under secular states. I mean, they are everywhere in England, in Europe, and in America.
Well,
I think Islam is...
Well, it's different because Muslims aren't a majority in those...
But they're not complaining, and we don't see anybody of them buying tickets back home. So, as a matter of fact, secular is actually more accepting to have everybody under the umbrella. I mean, can I just ask one question? Please. I mean, I've been asking this from the beginning. What is liberal Islam? What is democratic Islam? Who defines it? What part of Sharia should stay? What part of Sharia should go? And who decides? Seriously, that's my question. Liberal Islam is very vague. Please define it.
If it were up to you, who would decide? If it were up to you, who would decide who that is?
No, but there's a rule of law. But democracy is a man-made concept that we can discuss. But once you put Islam in, you're putting a divine concept, which makes it very difficult to decide and fight about.
Well, Bassem, I
might be not religious.
Can I disagree with Bassem on one thing?
You can disagree with Bassem, but then we're going to go to the Q&A because we've only got 10 minutes.
Give me an example. Give me an example. What does it look like? What does this amazing unicorn called Islamic liberalism look like? Who decides?
Nobody decides, actually, that's the point, because it's liberal, you know, it's by nature, it's decentralized, and it's happening
People who are
organically.
thinking-
Well, good
What
luck.
is it?
I think if we as Muslims could decide, like an example, and then go back
Okay,
to
one
the people.
thing, I wrote a book about
is
it.
this
They're
a-
flashing because they're
This is
flashing
really a
because
stand-up
it's
comedy
getting to
club.
the
You're flashing
end.
the light.
Just one point. Can I make one point?
You're killing me, Mustafa. You've got 30 seconds, and then I want to at least get
I
two
just don't
questions in.
agree with the suggestion that when divine is invoked, things become more dogmatic and it doesn't change. The same thing you can say Karl Marx is invoked, you can change it. Marxists worship the guy. In
Who said
Turkey,
Stalin or Karl Marx or
Ataturk
Hitler
was just
or Mao
the
Zedong are
divine
good
authority
examples.
who couldn't be
These are
discussed.
horrible
Okay.
examples.
Wait,
and
I'm going
nobody's
to time
using
out,
them
guys.
as
I'm actually
examples.
going to do the
These
most
are
American
secularists,
thing.
not secular, as you said.
Bassem, you're making a Brit. Wait,
People
Mustafa, no.
people make religion
I'm
out
time
of
outing
everything.
because we
No.
only have 6 or 7 minutes left. That's it. I've done. I'm going to be, honestly, Mary Poppins about this. You all must be quiet for a moment so I can ask our very patient audience. Thank you. You've all been wonderful, by the way. Okay, is there a microphone roaming? I know there's a microphone. Fabulous. Okay, let me ask lady in the white over there. Let's ask lady in the white first.
Hi, I'm Monica Marks from Oxford University, lady in the white. Thank you for a wonderfully lively conversation. I just wondered how the panel would respond to a couple of comments. I think Mahrzia was making some very good points about the importance of focusing on processes and power, looking beyond a word like secularism, which, to be honest, like the word Islamism, often confuses a lot more than it clarifies. For example, we often just assume that Turkey is a secular country because its constitution uses the word laiklik, secularism. And we often assume that Habib Bourguiba in Tunisia was very secular. But when we look at how people living in those countries under Ataturk and under Bourguiba, especially more conservatively inclined people, experienced secularism, it's very different than what we think of in the West as secularism. It wasn't a separation between church and state. It was a top-down, paternalistic authoritarianism. You couldn't be an imam in either country unless you were a direct employee of the state.
I think it's a great comment. Do you have a question? It's just because we've only got a few minutes.
My
so what's the
question
question?
was simply, shouldn't we deconstruct the word secularism a lot more and give attention to the fact that maybe one of the reasons people in the region have such a problem with the idea is because the only way they might have experienced was under authoritarian leaders who were not secular by any Western definition?
That's a great question. Shadi, I think I'll come to you with that one. What do you think about that, Shadi?
Oh, okay. You want us to?
If you could answer the question,
Okay.
yeah, please.
Yeah. Well, look, I would say it's important to distinguish between secularism as the separation of religion from politics and secularism as the separation of mosque and state. And I think oftentimes we use this word secularism, and there are two different ways of looking at it. So obviously, the U.S. has separation of church and state, but it's a place where people can express religious beliefs very aggressively in the public sphere, even to the extent of limiting the rights of women, let's say in the case of abortion. So I think that we have to deconstruct secularism and talk about what kind of secularism, the kind of secularism that's more accepting of religion in the public sphere that we have in the U.S., or the more restrictive secularism that we see in parts of Europe, but also historically in Turkey. But when it comes to someone like Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, so a lot of people who we call secularists are actually just people who hate Islamists. And I think that's another really important distinction to make. There's no one who hates the Brotherhood more than Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. But no one should be under
Or the king of Saudi Arabia.
Right, that too. But no one should be under the assumption that Sisi is a secularist, or
Right.
that the king of Saudi Arabia promotes secular ideals. So that is something we have to be careful about.
I think that's a good point. Yeah, Modarressy, yeah.
Yes, indeed, Monica, I think that we have to deconstruct not only secularism as a concept, but also Islamism. What is Islamism? And I think it is an imposed designation or designated identity, Islamist. Okay, who tell you that I introduce myself or I see myself as Islamist? I see myself as a woman, Muslim, Democrat, whatever. Why do you add this ist, first of all? And then to compare maybe through our history, the history of the Muslim world, aspects of secularism and vice versa. aspect of religiosity in secular countries. I lived in France, and I know that, for example, Catholicism is a deeply entrenched culture in France, in the very laïc France. So we have to do this work. Why? To pacify this relation with secularism. Because our collective memory has a very harsh and aggressive image of secularism due to colonization. And we have to walk this path together to pacify memories.
I know that we've got about 4 minutes left. This gentleman in the blue has been waiting for a while, so can we just ask that question? And if you could keep your question very short and answers the same, please, because I want to get one more question after this as well.
يعني هي أولاً أنا راح أحكي بالعربي فيا please listen to translation. أحمد العكايلي من الأردن مرة أخرى، وشكراً على إتاحة الفرصة. المتحدثين 3 عرب على ما أعتقد راح يفهموني. بداية أعتقد أن هناك خلل في طرح السؤال الأول: هل الإسلام فيه سياسة؟ الإسلام كما أي ظاهرة اجتماعية لابد أن ترتبط بما هو سياسي، مثل النسوية، مثل المدافعين عن البيئة، عندما يريدون أن يدخلون أو يؤثرون فلا بد أن يدخلوا إلى مجال السياسة حتى يتحكموا فيها. القضية الثانية: هناك خلط بين الشريعة كدين وبين الشريعة كقوانين، وهو ما يطرحه الأستاذ باسم يوسف، بمعنى أن الشريعة بما هي قوانين هي قوانين تطورية خاضعة لظروف المجتمع، وبالتالي هي قادرة على أن تستوعب كل الأجناس وكل الأطياف وكل الأفكار مع تطور المجتمع. ومن يقرر ذلك؟ من يقرر ذلك الشعب سيدي، وهو عين وأساس الديمقراطية.
يعني الشعب، يعني الشعب، يعني الشعب،
الشعب
يعني الشعب، يعني من هم أهل الدين؟
الشعب المصري.
أهل الدين؟
الشعب المصري.
الشعب
المصري.
أي شعب؟
ممكن أكمل؟
أي شعب؟
الشعب المصري.
يا شعب مصري بس؟
90 مليون مصري.
الشعب المصري بس؟ طب والشعب الأردني
والشعب
التونسي والشعب السعودي
كل يقرر، كل يقرر في مجاله.
طب وماذا إذا الشعب اختلف؟
نقطتين ضروري.
This is very general.
ضروري.
We've really run out of time, and I just want to get one more question in after this. I'm so sorry.
شكرا أستاذ باسم.
هل هو شيخ الأزهر؟
But there'll be some time to continue this afterwards, and of course all of our panelists are online as well on Twitter, so you can feel free to continue that conversation there. Okay, one more. That lady in the middle there, if you want to stand up, lady with a brown satchel around her. Yes, yeah, if you want to just stand up and ask a question. And this will be the last question for this afternoon's panel.
Hi, thanks for a really interesting panel. I'm interested that we haven't really talked about economic justice and economic inclusion, and the extent to which secularism and the dominant economic paradigm has failed to deliver economic justice for people, and that is in fact a driver for why many people turn to religion as a way, as a moral code to actually check the excesses of neoliberalism. So I just wondered what the panel thought about that.
That's a great question. Mustafa?
Well, certainly we don't have economic justice enough, we don't have economic freedom enough as well in the Middle East. I think the Middle East is dominated by statist economies, like in Egypt, whereas the government controls a huge chunk of the economy, actually the army indirectly, and so that suffocates society. That doesn't allow the evolution of a free market, economy that would, bring prosperity to a society. There are other countries with natural oil wealth and resources, which is good for that, but still it's not the same thing. So how do we build healthy market economies in the Middle East should always be a part of this discussion, because liberal ideas develop in a certain context, a social context. They don't develop where you have like an impoverished population and a little elite that is really sucking the wealth of population through their political power. And that is a part of the ongoing problem. And that is indeed what drives some people towards more radical ideologies.
I think, well, Shadia, I'll give you the last word, but then we'll have to wrap up.
But just to... I also want to give. Should they also?
We have to. Yeah, I'm being censured. I'm going to be the one getting caned outside. So, do you have a last point, or would you like to field the floor to Modarressy?
I can just say something very quickly to Ahmed's question on Sharia as laws, which I think is a really important thing, which is that when we think about laws in the Western sense, a legal tradition, we think about something that you can find in a law book. There are statutes, there are articles and provisions. This is a very modern conception of law. In the pre-modern era, you couldn't find Sharia in a book. You still can't find Sharia in a book. Sharia also includes private...
That's why Ottomans wrote Majalla to codify.
Yeah, exactly. That's a fairly recent thing to codify Sharia. And that's where I think the modern nation state has become part of the problem. The modern nation state wants to control and codify everything Islam was not designed for the modern nation state.
Interesting. Well, listen,
thank
you everybody very much for all of my panelists. If you could join me in a warm round of applause for our panel. Bassem Youssef, Modarressy Labidi-Maïza, Shadi Hamid, and Mustafa Akyol. Thank you very much. And we are serious that they are all online. I know that we didn't get to a lot of topic matter today because obviously it's a very well-subscribed panel and there are lots more conversations happening throughout the day. So be sure to tweet at them and continue that conversation in the hallways as well. And of course, stick around for the panels in the rest of the afternoon. Thank you all very much for being a great audience as well. Thank you.